26 rooms high, 26 rooms across.
17,576 rooms.
Hello everyone and welcome back to Off the Shelf Reviews, and today we're going to be talking about 1997 movie The Cube. Or Cube. And it was from a director named
Vincenzo Natali,
who later went on in 2009 to make Splice, which is another interesting sci-fi movie. But today we're going to talk about Cube, the first one of a trilogy, although I'll explain later why you should probably ignore the other two movies. The story of Cube is quite simple. It's a very simplistic type movie. It was made on a very small budget of just $300,000.
Yeah.
And it's about 7 people that wake up in a strange room, which is very Cube-esque.
Yeah.
And it's initially about these people trying to understand, how they got there, why they're there, and trying to understand their environment. And then it's basically about them trying to escape this cube, regardless of how many rooms there actually are.
There's a lot of rooms.
An awful lot of rooms. Yeah. So we've just finished watching the film, and Geoff, it's the first time you've even seen the film.
Yeah, I've heard about the film, and it's seen kind of clips and stuff. So I understood something of the general premise, that they were stuck in some kind of eternal maze.
Yeah.
But that's all I knew about the film before I watched it. And so my overriding impression of the film is that the film is very focused on that kind of claustrophobic feel that you would get if you were trapped in this kind of huge 3-dimensional maze. And there's elements of Saw in there, where they're all in a perilous situation, because each of these rooms, they don't know, they may or may not have a trap. And there's a way in which they can, sort of try and navigate their way through the maze, and there's little clues about how they can do it. And the story is really about, you never really find out anything about how the cube is built or why it's there.
Well,
but you get they make little social commentary, like pieces of dialogue. There's little moments of social commentary on why the cube exists. But other than that, it's pretty much the whole story centres around the few characters that are there, and about their interaction and the way their characters change and evolve whilst they're having to deal with this claustrophobia and the stressful situation
killer
that they're
Rubik's
dealing with.
Cube.
Yeah, that's it. It's just a big killer Rubik's Cube.
I love this film. I remember watching it the first time and thinking, what the hell? These people are just climbing through room to room to room. Safe, clear, laser tripwire dead. Oh, yes.
The film opens quite fantastically as well, with just the one guy just perilously going from one very similar room to another. And the first time you watch the film, you have no background about it, and you're just watching him, and you're like, okay, and then that trap just swings right through him, and it's so
Brilliant.
Nicely done. It reminded me of the scene
So
from
quiet.
Resident Evil,
Oh,
yeah,
it's
yeah.
so
with the red
quiet.
lasers.
I mean, spoilers, this film's over 10 years old, almost 12 years old, and it's just one room. That's brilliant design in filmmaking, just one room and just change the colours.
There's not many there's not many films that take place in a singular room. Most of them are probably horror films, but often or not, they're usually dramas. They're always about the interactions of other people.
Yeah.
And that's what's fantastic about The Cube, is that 90% of the film is about these characters bonding and making connections with each other about what their lives were like, and how each of those kind of typical people would deal with being stuck in that kind of environment.
You could actually have easily made this film a stage show, couldn't you? And you could have represented the entire concepts through a single theatre set.
Yeah.
And that is really, I would say that comes through actually in also the selection of the actors that have been chosen.
Definitely.
Is that you can tell that the actors in doing their roles, they can tell that the focus is on them, that it is all about their theatrics and how much they're going to bring to the role. I would argue that some of them do it better than others, though. You know, there are some characters there that I think maybe slightly overplay their parts, and the script writing, I would say, doesn't always necessarily live up to the kind of it doesn't have it's not of the high enough quality to make the actual characters entirely believable, even though some of the actors are trying their hardest to give it what it's got, but the script writing is kind of a little bit lackluster in giving them some flesh sometimes.
Well, I gotta go against that. I mean, the characters themselves. You've got the cop, you've got the doctor, you've got the mathematician, you've got the guy who designed the outer shell. The outer shell of this cube, you know. Hey, here's your job. This is how much I'm going to pay you, and now just design me a killer death machine. But their characters, their stories are good. The cube itself is a character. Them every time they open that door really slowly, you're just like, what's coming next?
You're not getting out of here.
Yes, we are! There is no way out of here!
We need to get around the trap.
They're identified by prime numbers.
Figure it out.
I can't!
I'm not dying in a rat maze!
No more talking. No more guessing. You gotta save yourselves from yourselves.
What the hell's going on?
I always thought the brilliance of Cube is you don't know when it's set. Is it present day? Is it future? Is it, you know, is it a government
It is
machine?
almost timeless in that regard.
Is it in space? Is it underwater? And it's just the cube.
The whole film is stripped of any kind of outside reference really at all.
Yeah.
Which is how it becomes so honed down on two things really: the metaphor of what the cube is, and the actual character interaction. Everything else, there's nothing else in the film other than the clothes they wear, which is this kind of uniform.
But that's the brilliance of it. It's such a simple film to follow. As soon as you have the opening sequence, you're just like, what is this? And then you just follow these 5-6 people through the rooms, and you're with them all the way. You're observing them. You know, do you want that guy to die? Do you want her to survive? And I mean, up until the end sequence, and in that final room.
Well, that's the thing. The film takes place over perhaps several days, and in that time they've got no food, they've got no water, and they've only got their own kind of body clocks to go by how much time is actually passing. And the camera work and the filmmaking part of it, they try and emulate that kind of dehydration, paranoia, claustrophobia, all of these kind of pressures that are being applied to them on top of the fact that they're in a death maze. There is possibly, conceivably, no exit. And as you said, some of them are mathematicians.
Yeah.
And so each room has like three-digit codes. And so they start to try and come up with the idea of how big the cube is.
Of course, coded Cartesian coordinates. They're used in geometry to plot points on a three-dimensional graph.
In English, slower.
Bonjour. These numbers are markers, a grid reference, like latitude and longitude on a map. The numbers tell us where we are inside the cube.
And I think they found out that there was more than 17,000 rooms in the cube.
That
move as well.
How can you imagine?
So for me as a film watcher, it was a very enigmatic movie because it just kept posing more questions to you, and it never gave you the answers, which is unfortunately what the latter movies in the trilogy do. They start to give you those answers, and that for me is what ruins the concept of what the first Cube movie is. And it is just it is a simplistic film, but it is full of surprises, and it explores that kind of darker side of mankind's kind of folly as well as stupidity.
It's a film where less is more, definitely, isn't it?
Yeah.
Like the more they add to it, the more they could ruin the whole premise of it.
Yeah.
In cutting down any kind of outside frame of reference, it does literally whittle down to the pure factors of the metaphor
characters.
and the characters, and that's all it. And once you start throwing in too much other stuff, a little bit like Prometheus syndrome, perhaps, you know, where you start beginning to ask too many questions, it would distract from the ultimate sort of what is good about the film, which is the way they've handled that kind of very simple concept and yet given it as much meaning as they can.
I'm a bit harsh feeling in this, but as much as I love the characters and the stories that go, I did want to see more of them get caught in traps. am I the only one? I mean, when that guy, spoilers, when he gets that shot to the face, the detail of his head when he's lying on the floor. I mean, the first death.
Yeah, the first death is
cheese
by and
work.
large the best death in the movie for me. I think, you know, if you're a fan of the Saw movies, Cube kind of had that idea beforehand. You can kind of imagine that the Cube was probably one of
Referenced.
Jigsaw's, you know, breakfast kind of projects.
I mean, obviously, talking about the second and third ones, they do describe more of the background story, but they do have extra traps in.
Yeah, they kind of took that formula.
Yeah,
People
some
just want to see death
anti-gravity
traps.
rooms and the spike room in Cube 1.
Sound activated.
The autistic kid, that whole part is completely filmed in silence.
So quiet.
And then he just sat there like, don't make a noise, don't make a noise. And then, and the spikes, they all come flying through.
There were some good tension moments, actually. They handled those quite well, and because you were invested enough in the characters, you didn't really want any of them to die at that point. So,
No.
So they had those moments of suspense and horror a little splash of horror as well to give it some kind of, you know, excitement.
Yeah.
But I would say largely for me, I don't know if it was enough to carry through the whole film. I found the whole film quite interesting as a real piece of filmmaking, a set piece on such a limited budget with a very restricted set. You know, like what can you do? What's the potential that you can do in terms of holding an audience interest? And I think it's a very good example as a set piece of what you can do with about $300,000. But I found myself feeling claustrophobic in the film as well, because it started to go quite slowly, and I began to detach a little bit from the characters. I began to see them some of the acting as a little bit hammy.
Where they begin to annoy you.
Yeah, and they begin to annoy you a little bit. Yeah.
That's kind of like how they're behaving against each other, though, because they've been stuck with each other for an even longer period of time.
I get that is what the film is trying to do. It's trying to make you feel like with them in the room. Yeah, like you want to go. Oh, just get away from it. Get away from the situation.
For me, it was completely different. For me, it was more of a case of like Big Brother. I was Big Brother, and I built the cube, and I'm watching these human rats run around this puzzle.
Yeah. Well, I mean, for me, I was getting this tension where I was getting the feeling like I wanted to get out of the film. And I didn't care enough about the characters, any one of them. They hadn't sort of bonded me to any of the characters enough, and they weren't interesting enough in themselves to make me care about what the eventuality was and who lived and who died. You just wanted to get
out of the cube. That's the brilliance of this film.
That's the thing. I mean, I don't know if it's the brilliance and also the kind of the flaw of the film as well, because it wouldn't make me want to go back.
Of course not. Go back inside the cube.
Because on other horror films, you know, you get that moment of tension but there's nothing there to draw me back to go, oh yeah, you know, I really, really want to watch these 5 guys stuck in
that scene again.
But I mean, once you know how to escape from the cube, you know, if you're going to go back and watch it, it's going to be a couple of years down the line when you've forgotten about how the rooms work. And, you know, once it gets to that point of the film where they actually explain, you know, not spoiling, but you just kind of sit there and go, Shit.
The,
You know.
the maths bit was tedious, I found, you know, and the character that was the mathematician was possibly the blandest one.
Oh, she did say she was boring.
There is nothing else. My parents are these people. I live with them. I'm boring.
Yeah, I suppose she
Yeah.
did, yeah.
Would you consider this film a sci-fi, a horror?
It's a sci-fi horror movie.
See, I was
I think so.
I was thinking that. I mean, there's not many sci-fi apart from the Cube itself being a massive sci-fi
Yeah.
reference, I suppose. You know, but going into the design of it, you know, the one of the characters, he actually designed the outer shell, and you see that scene where they're trying to swing to the edge. Oh,
Yourselves, I'm gonna try again. Okay. One more time.
Hurry! You're getting heavy!
that if I was inside the cube, I would be scared shitless. I would just look at the outside and be like, "What the fuck?"
Yeah, that's that big reveal when they do eventually get to the outer shell of the cube, only to realise that they're in a massive container with no other conceivable exit.
Where the fuck is this thing?
You really do start to feel hemmed in, and like it is a perilous task to try and escape from.
Yeah.
So, but anyway, favourite scene, Ian, from the movie?
Oh, see, I've got to be quite harsh. Any of the traps, the traps themselves, the cheese wire sequence, the acid to the face, the spike room. I mean, you just don't want to move, but everybody's like, "Come on, we've got to get a way out of here." No, stay still.
My favourite scene is it's the scene where they're talking about who they think's put them here, or whether it's possibly been aliens, whether it was a government job, or whether it was just some rich billionaire who just wanted it as a piece of entertainment, kind of like Battle Royale or Big Brother,
Running Man,
or Running Man. But it's also where they're kind of like, they almost kind of look to the camera and laugh. It's almost because as an audience watching it, they're right. They are just in the cube for our entertainment. And
watching us.
It's a bit break the fourth wall moment of the film, which I never actually picked up on all the other times I'd watched it. But for me, so yeah, that's my favourite scene.
Remember Scaramanga? The bad guy and the man with the golden gun?
Yeah.
It's some rich psycho's entertainment.
Is that what you think?
Yeah, that reminds me of Gladiator as well, isn't it? It's like, am I here for your entertainment? For me, my favourite scene, I've got to admit, I found generally the characters just didn't hook me in enough for me to really enjoy those moments where it was all about the character interaction. So the scenes that stand out in my mind are the gory bits, the bits where you actually had the special effects. And yeah, the couple of death scenes were quite entertaining and a little bit predictable, but they were fairly good for 1997, So they're the most memorable and interesting. Are they my favourite? Yeah, I suppose they're my favourite. Just about. But we're talking very kind of, tiny little increments of difference in what I would say is a relatively bland film. Really.
Would you recommend the film on the death sequences itself?
I would recommend the film to somebody that's interested in filmmaking and wants to kind of get ideas on what's possible. With that whole kind of using theatrics and acting to create a really good film, but it doesn't quite hit the mark of a really good film, but it really does kind of offer some interesting ideas.
See, I think that this film is a classic. If you watched it back in the day, back in '98, revisit it again. This film It's got everything you need, you know, screw those Hollywood remakes. Apart from the most recent one, obviously.
Of course. So yeah, I really recommend the Cube. Like I said, just the first one. If you watch the first film and you really enjoy it and you're really taken by the sci-fi concept of the Cube, then perhaps you're going to go and also watch the second and third one. I don't recommend either of those films. Like I said, they'll take away from this first one. Watch the first one if you enjoy sci-fi and horror, and if you like enigmatic stories that don't always give you the answers, that allow you to think for yourself. And also, I think there is enough acting talent in the film that the characters do have some good scenes with each other. There is some bad writing. And
I like the Blue Room.
But it serves its purpose for what is, you know, only an hour and a half movie. And I think it's a really tight, well-made, low-budget film, and I think it feels like it had a bigger budget than what it did. So yeah, I really recommend The Cube. I think there's enough traps, enough tension, enough drama, and enough excitement to
character development.
Yeah, to cause revisiting the film if you've already seen it. Yeah.
Single bullet theory. Right on.
Gas!
Holloway, get back here.
It's okay. I just swallowed my button.